Jumping into the number 5 spot of the top 5 best gaming mechanical keyboards in 2024 is the Yunziii YZ87, coming in at a price tag of $74.59. And if you want to check out any of the 5 keyboards in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. But let's talk about the YZ87. Now, even with that almost $75 price tag, you can actually get this very regularly on sale for $65 or around that. So make sure to check the links below for current pricing. All right, but let's talk form factor and build quality. This is a 10 keyless form factor. It has a 2-piece plastic shell with tons of custom indents and grooves throughout. And this comes with 2 custom inserts that replace the print, scroll, and pause keys and give that really cool, fun, custom look with adding a little bit of that RGB element to it. The case does have some flex, but it overall feels really well put together. There is dongle storage, a mode selecting switch, a Windows and Mac switch, as well as a glossy light bar with that Yunziii logo next to it. As for dampening, this has foam between the plate and the PCB, IXPE soundproofing film, foam, and silicone in the case. This is also gasket mounted. It also has a nice poppy sound that I find is not too loud, but just is very satisfying, and I think they really did a good job with the sound here. As for color options, you can either get this in white or black. For switches, these use Yunzii's own milk switches. They are factory lubed and they have a springy feel to them. Like when you bottom these out, they want to pop back up very quickly. I really like them, and I think they have a nice weight to them with that fun poppy sound again. These definitely add to that sound profile. They aren't as smooth as the switches on the next keyboard on the list, but overall they are a pretty great budget switch from Yunziii. And this is fully hot swappable with 3 and 5 pin switches, so if you do want to swap in whatever switch you want, you can do that. All right, but let's talk keycaps and stabilizers. The stabilizers here are plate mounted. They are pre-lubed and tuned from the factory and overall sound really nice. There are some very slight ticks or rattles, but if you're not an enthusiast, you're probably not going to notice these. Overall, they did a very good job. Not quite perfect, but a very good job. The keycaps here are double shot PBT and they are cherry profile, which I do appreciate. They have a much smoother texture to them, but still a little grippy. They have a nice thickness, some printing inconsistencies, yes, but overall pretty good, especially for that price tag. But with that, let's take a listen to the sound test. And that is how it sounds, but make sure to stick around to the end of the video when we do a back-to-back sound test of all of the keyboards. But to wrap it up with connectivity and RGB, this is wired with a detachable USB Type-C or wireless with Bluetooth or a 2.4 GHz USB dongle if you want to use this for gaming. As for battery size, this has a pretty large battery at 5,000 milliamp hours. RGB is great here. It's south-facing, which is a big pro, obviously because it has cherry profile keycaps. It's bright, well diffused, it's got tons of modes, perky lighting, pretty much exactly what you'd expect and want. But with that, let's move on to the number 4 spot, which is the Aula F99, coming in at a price tag of $82.89. This has a little bit more of a unique form factor. It is a 96% keyboard. This has a 2-piece plastic case with rounded edges, unique angles, and indents, as well as a small RGB light bar between the number pad and the letter keys that's actually very bright and well diffused. The case feels very dense and well put together. There's minimal flex, dongle storage, a mode selecting switch, and a machined metal looking accent around the USB-C and the hub. As for dampening here, there is foam between the plate and the PCB, a switch dampening pad, noise canceling film, pour-on foam, and silicone in the case. And then this is also gasket mounted. It is crazy what you get for a mechanical keyboard for the price in today's market. It's wild. For color options, you actually do get a few, and they're kind of interesting. You have white with a purple and blue accents like the one that I have, black, gray, white, or white and blue. I think for a lot of people, they'll be able to find one that they like there, and I do appreciate that they're a little bit more unique colorways. Now let's talk switches. These switches are amazing. For gaming, also phenomenal, especially. These have the Leobog Greywood V3 switches. They are a lighter linear switch, they are factory lubed, and are super smooth. They have a great bottom out feel. Overall, I was super impressed with these switches, and for gaming, this is a dream. It's exactly what you want. definitely a huge highlight and selling point of this keyboard. The sound, which you'll hear soon enough, is also satisfying. As well, if for some reason you don't end up loving these switches, this is fully hot swappable with 3 and 5 pin switches, so you can always swap them out. Now for the keycaps and stabilizers, the stabilizers here are plate mounted, and they are very well lubed and tuned from the factory. There is some very minimal ticking on some of the stabs, but you really have to listen for it. Overall, these are great, as you'll hear in the sound test. As for keycaps, these are non-shine-through double-shot PBT keycaps. They have a slight texture, nice thickness, and the printing is also pretty good as well. But with that, take a listen to the sound test. And that is how it sounds. For connectivity, this is wired via a detachable USB Type-C or wireless with Bluetooth or a USB dongle. And this has a massive battery, so if you want to run this wirelessly, you'll be able to run it for quite a while with an 8,000 milliamp hour battery. That is a behemoth. The RGB here is also great here. There's tons of mode, it's bright, it's vibrant, it's also well diffused, tons of static colors, but this is north facing. However, the keycaps are actually cherry profile, and they're able to do this because the full travel distance is not that 2mm downstroke that you would see on most of your traditional switches. This is a little bit shorter, better for gaming, better bottom out feel, and you can still run cherries, which I think is great. But with that, let's move on to the number 3 spot, and this is another keyboard from Yunziii. This is the Yunziii B75, coming in at a price tag of $65.99, but at the time of filming, you can get this for slightly under 60 bucks, which is a freaking steal. So check the links below for current pricing. This is a 75% form factor with a knob. The outer coating of the knob is metal, and there is a very minimal wobble, but overall very nice to use. The case here is a 2-piece plastic shell with attractive rounded edges, and even though this is completely plastic, there is a very minimal flex, and the plastic feels very dense. When I picked this up, it had a surprising amount of weight to it, which I do appreciate. This does not feel like a cheap keyboard. It feels a lot more expensive than the price tag. Now, on the top left, there is a white RGB indicator bar that is really well diffused, which I think is a nice little touch. And then there is a switch for Windows, Mac, or Android connections. As for dampening, there is foam between the plate and the PCB, a switch dampening pad, a soundproof film, foam and silicone in the case. Oh, and then this is gasket mounted. Very nice. The keyboards you can get for these prices now are just wild. For colors, you don't have anything super crazy. It's just between white and black. Now, for switches here, like the F99, these have the phenomenal switches, the Leobog Greywood V3 switches, which are, again, an absolute dream. They really are that good for this price point. They're linear, super smooth, have a fantastic bottom out feel. I freaking love these switches. I genuinely love these switches. And if for some reason you don't end up liking the switches, which I think you will, but this is fully hot swappable with 3 and 5 pin switches, so you can swap them whatever you want. But how are the keycaps and stabilizers? Well, the stabilizers are plate mounted, and they are very well tuned and lubed from the factory with only a super slight tick on the right side of the spacebar and the backspace, but literally that is it. You really have to hit it in the right spot to hear that, at least on my keyboard. They are overall great, and the keycaps are cherry profile, double shot PBT. They're nice and thick, and they have a great sound to them. The shine through here is also bright and well diffused. Really, I have no complaints. They did a great job on both the keycaps and those stabilizers. But don't take my word for it, take a listen to the sound test. And that is how it sounds. For connectivity, this is wired only with a detachable USB Type-C. So while on paper it's not as good of a value, I do think this keyboard is surprisingly surprisingly good to use. For feel, while it's not the most beautiful keyboard on the list for sure, it's just a little bit plain with a little bit of modding. The feel of this keyboard stock is phenomenal. It really just needs to have better visuals. That's something you can easily do with buying a set of keycaps or spray painting the case or doing something, but the feel of this keyboard, so good. Using it for gaming, really good for the price. Now, for RGB, this is only blue lighting. It has great diffusion though, and it's very bright. It also has some nice modes. And lastly, this has north-facing LEDs, but with that, let's move on to the number 2 spot. And this is the Dareu EK75 Pro. This is priced at $74.99, but at the time of filming, there is a pretty freaking wild substantial deal off of it, so definitely check the links below for current pricing. I have no idea how those keyboards will fluctuate in price. This again has a 75% form factor with a knob, which we love. The knob is made of plastic, has tactile bumps, and basically has zero wobble. The case is a 2-piece plastic shell with awesome, well-diffused, bright RGB sign accents. There's also some glossy accents, dongle storage, and a switch for different connectivity modes. And with this colorway, it looks like a custom. This is also gasket mounted with a freaking massive amount of flex when typing. This thing is literally like a freaking trampoline. And because of that, I actually really liked the feel of this keyboard. It just feels good and it sounds pretty damn good. As for dampening, there is foam between the plate and the PCB, a switch dampening pad, and foam in the case. Now for colorways, you can either get this in gray on black with orange accents, like the one that I have, or you can get white on black with red accents. So there are a few different colorways, but I do like that it's subtle, but still has some flair to it. As for switches, this comes with Dareu's own switches. These are the Dream Hi-Fi linear switches. They are factory lubed and feel impressively smooth for a budget switch. They are on the more quiet side and overall just feel pretty dang nice, especially when gaming. Now, these paired with the dampening makes for a really satisfying, quiet, muted, but creamy sound, which I really like. As for hot swappability, this is fully hot swappable with 3 and 5 pin switches. And when we do the sound test, you're really going to get what I mean about a quiet, creamy sound, which I really do think is maybe one of the best sounding keyboards on the list. Well, actually not maybe. It is the best sounding keyboard on the list in my opinion. Now before we get to the sound test, let's talk keycaps and stabilizers. Very important. The stabilizers here are plate mounted and lubed and greased from the factory. The stabilizers are basically almost perfectly tuned with just a very, very, very slight rattle on the shift and enter keys, but that is very slight again. Overall, these sound great. The keycaps are non-shine through, cherry profile, and have a slight texture to them. Overall, full pass. They did a great job here, but with that, let's take a listen to the EK75 Pro. And that is how it sounds. For connectivity, this is wired with a detachable USB Type-C. You can also use this wirelessly with Bluetooth or a 2.4 GHz USB dongle for gaming. And as for battery life, this has a 3,750 milliamp hour battery. RGB is pretty much exactly what you'd expect here. They are not shine-through keycaps, but the RGB itself is bright and vibrant. The side case lighting is also bright and well diffused with no dim spots, and the LEDs are south-facing, so overall, in my book, this gets a freaking full pass. But with that, jumping into the number 1 best budget mechanical gaming keyboard of 2024 is the Tecware Phantom 87 Plus Elite. Now this comes in at 2 different price points because there's the Plus and then the Plus Elite. This is only $55.99 for the Plus and $79.99 for the Plus Elite. So really just based on how much money you have, those are the ones to pick if you really just want the best all-around gaming keyboard. Both of these have a 10 key less form factor. Both of the Phantom's build quality is also immense. There is a very solid top metal plate that is color matched to the board for the Plus Elite, or a metallic gray for the Plus. The case is a single piece plastic shell that has these modern looking edges with hexagons and glossy accents. It just looks really good. Then with the Elite, you also get a detachable magnetic skirt. However, where the build quality excels is inside of the board, with 2 layers of foam between the plate and the PCB, one being traditional foam and one being of a higher quality, more expensive foam, pour-on foam. Almost unheard of to have that at this low of a price point. In the case, it follows suit here, having 2 more layers of foam. Not only this, but this has rubber dampeners for the spacebar stabilizers, which is super impressive for the price. For the switches, these are actually Tecware's own switches. You have a pretty wide range between the Wraith Brown and Orange, which are tactiles, and then the Wraith Red and Pink, which are linears. These do come pre-lubed, although not super thick, but overall I was very impressed with the quality of these switches. While the switches here aren't quite on the level of the F99 and B75, those are definitely the best switches on the list, but for most people in this price point, this is going to feel like a very high-end switch and is an overall better keyboard, which is why it's in the #1 spot. As for hot swappability, this is fully hot swappable with 3 and 5 pin switches, which is the first time ever on a Tecware board. Now, let's talk stabilizers and keycaps. Great stabilizer tuning, tone, they just feel really good and much more expensive than it actually is. A few tiny little rattles or ticks, but overall still very impressive. The keycaps have really good shine through with a slight texture on the Elite keycaps and a more smooth texture for the Plus's keycaps. As you can see, you do get those 2-tone double shot PBT keycaps for the Elite and just black double shot ABS keycaps for the Plus, but again, they both feel nice. But with that, let's see how these sound. Take a listen to the Tecware Phantom 87 Plus Elite. And that is how it sounds. For connectivity, you can use this with a detachable USB Type-C. For the Plus and then the Elite, you add wireless connectivity with a Bluetooth or 2.4 GHz USB dongle and only a 2500 milliamp hour battery. However, the Elite is not really that much more than the Plus. For RGB, this has super bright RGB lighting, tons of colors, tons of modes, per key lighting. It's vibrant. You have a million static colors, a full pass with RGB. But again, if you want to check out any of the 5 keyboards in this video, there's Amazon links below for the US, UK, Canada, and international links. But with that, take a listen to the back-to-back sound test.